Pikachu!
Everybody, yeah, rock your body, yeah, everybody, yeah, Pika Pals is back, alright. Hello wonderful people and welcome to the Pika Pals Podcast. I am your host, Pokemon Trainer Jed, and I thank you for tuning in. Now, the Pika Pals Podcast is where I am on a mission to rewatch, recap, and laugh my way through every episode of the original Pokemon anime series. And on today's episode, I'll be talking about episode 10 of the Pokemon anime. So that means we've made it up to episode 10, only 70 more episodes to go in season 1. Hang in there, folks, it's going to be a wild adventure. Now, I'd like to start off by saying thank you to everyone who's taken the time to tune in, and thank you for spreading the word about the Pika Pals podcast. I am using this as a platform to raise money for my local mental health charity, Mind in Somerset. They do amazing work supporting those with mental health struggles, and they've helped me in the past, which is why I've wanted to raise money for them. I have a fundraiser going on right now called Pika Pals Unite, and you can find my Just Giving page in the episode description. Huge thank you to everyone who's donated so far. It's really, really appreciated, and I'm blown away by your kindness. I set a goal of £151, 151 being the number of original Pokemon, and in less than a month, we've almost smashed the target, so I'm really grateful to anyone who's supported the podcast and anyone who has supported my fundraiser for mental health. People seem to be enjoying the Pika Pals podcast, and that brings me joy. I have been honest with you guys from the beginning that I've struggled with doing this myself. I struggle with self-esteem and I struggle with anxiety. Sometimes I can kind of get into a place where I'm trying to be such a perfectionist about things that I never get anything completed because I don't see it as finished, I don't see it as good enough, I don't view myself as good enough, and diving into a creative project like this, starting my own podcast, was something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but something that I'd really battled against myself with because I'm my own biggest critic. I've said before that I was going to try and record one episode, a pilot episode of a Pokemon podcast, and I was going to send it out to some friends and just see if I could do that. And the feedback and the support that I've had has been so incredibly kind that here we are. Now I'm up to episode 10 of the Pokemon anime. I've recorded multiple episodes of the podcast. I've had guests on, I've had family members on, I've had friends on, and I've got more guests lined up. And it really is quite amazing. But it's all thanks to you guys listening right now. So wherever you are listening to this podcast, whether you're listening on Spotify, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, whether you're listening on Amazon Music, whether you're watching on YouTube and just kind of staring at a still image of a video, maybe you're listening on cassette tape. I don't know where you're listening. Maybe you found a gramophone and I'm on there. It's all thanks to you that the Pika Pals podcast is still going. And your support has encouraged me to carry on with this adventure, carry on with my own Pokemon adventure, which is the Pika Pals podcast. Who knows where it may take us, but I want to be the very best at the Pika Pals podcast specifically, like no one ever was. And to entertain them is my real test. To make them laugh is my cause. So let's see what the future holds. If you'd like to keep up with the latest on the Pika Pals podcast, don't forget you can follow me across all your favourite social media channels at Yeetamania, and then you can send me questions, suggestions, or if you just want to chat about Pokemon or be a guest on the show, let me know. You can also email me at yeetamania@gmail.com. Once again, all the details of my Pika Pals Unite fundraiser are in the episode description, so any donation of any amount really will be appreciated and make a difference to fighting mental health. So, that's the intro, and let's get to today's episode. It's a good one. It's where we first get to meet Bulbasaur. So, let's get to it. Turn that hat backwards, grab your Pokeballs, and get ready for the Pika Pals Podcast. Okay, folks, you're listening to the Pika Pals Podcast, where I'm going back and rewatching every single episode of the original Pokemon anime series. Then I'm coming here on the podcast, talking all about it. And today we are up to episode 10. This one is called Bulbasaur and the Hidden Village. The Japanese title is Fushingadane of the Hidden Village. That's Fushingadane of the Hidden Village. Apologies for that awful Japanese pronunciation of that word. Yep, it's the episode where we first get to meet Bulbasaur, and this was first broadcast in Japan on June the 3rd, 1997, would then go on to be shown in the United States and beyond on September the 21st, 1998. Crazy when you think about how long ago this original Pokemon anime series was. I wasn't even 10 years old, and some of these episodes were being shown for the first time on television. So Pokemon has been with a lot of us for a lifetime. It really is generational, and it's a testament to Pokemon that it's still as popular today as it ever was. But yeah, when you just look at some of these dates when the episodes were first broadcast, we're talking like 1998. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that is some crazy, crazy times. But let's get talking about today's episode. I've just finished watching it. Bulbasaur and the Hidden Village. We start off, we see Ash and his friends, Brock and Misty, having a little wander through the forest. And without a compass, they're trying to find their way to Vermilion City. Not sure if Ash is going to have any luck with this. He hasn't been too successful so far finding his way anywhere, so especially without a compass. But yeah, we see Ash and Misty having an argument, as usual, about who led them off path and who led them astray. They're kind of just like wading through knee-high grass at this point. Better beware for ticks. That's always a tip for anyone walking through long grass, especially if you like shorts. And I do like shorts because they're comfy and easy to wear. But yeah, if you're in certain areas and you're walking through long grass, you could get ticks, which is a detriment really to bug Pokemon trainers, because from what we know about them, they enjoy wearing shorts, and they're probably more likely than anyone to be spending time in long grass. Then again, I suppose a tick is a type of bug, so maybe they wouldn't mind having a tick burrow into their lower leg. But yeah, anyway, there's a tip for you. Be careful, anyone wandering through long grass. So we see Ash and Misty, they're fighting. Brock, peacemaker, trying to calm things down as usual. And this is when they see an Oddish. Oddish is just there, he's like having a little drink, sipping from the lake. Like imagine how a cat laps up water from a bowl. That's what Oddish is doing. He's just there like... That was some ASMR Oddish for you. Oddish just drinking. And this gets the attention of Misty, who sends out her Starmie to fight Oddish so she can catch it. Now, although Oddish isn't a water-type Pokemon, Misty makes the justification that because he was drinking water, that's a close enough link to water-type Pokemon, so she should be entitled to catch it. Not quite sure if that works, because everyone drinks water, and, pretty much mostly everything in the world and living creatures are made up of water. So by that logic, Misty could just catch whatever Pokemon she likes. But there's not really any set rules to it. Misty kind of likes cute Pokemon as well as water Pokemon, and Oddish is cute if nothing else. Now, Oddish gets defeated by Starmie's water gun pretty quickly, And just as Misty is about to capture it with a Pokeball, the ball gets vine whipped out of the air and tossed to one side. Now, it's not AJ. He's not back with his whip. This was a vine whip, and it came from a Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur comes in, attacks Starmie, comes to the defense of Oddish, and KO Starmie, you are defeated. Ash, excited to see a Bulbasaur, gets at his Pokedex. He could have chosen a Bulbasaur if he'd only woken up in time, going back to episode 1. He could have chosen a Bulbasaur as one of his starter Pokemon. He had a choice of 3, and that would have been Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle. But he overslept, and instead he got Pikachu. So Ash sees this Bulbasaur, and he's excited. He's thinking, okay, I'm going to try and catch it. He sends out Butterfree. Butterfree uses the sleep powder attack, but Bulbasaur's able to blow the powder back at Butterfree, and both make a break for it and flee into the forest. This is actually where we see Pikachu's shocked face, which has become like a viral meme of a surprised Pikachu. Pikachu's reaction in that meme, in that GIF that has been shared on the internet over the past few years, is from this exact scene. So it's when Bulbasaur blows the sleep powder back at Butterfree, the Pikachu's like, whoa! And he is open mouth, shocked. So unsuccessful in trying to capture either Oddish or Bulbasaur, the gang continue on their journey. They come across a rope bridge. Now, we'd meet a lot of rope bridges in the original Pokemon anime series, and it never tends to go too well. This rope bridge would be no exception, because the wind would tear the rope bridge apart just as they were halfway across the bridge. In fact, Brock fell off the bridge and landed in the river below. So that is the end of Brock. He's gone. He's landed in the river. Meanwhile, Ash clinging on for dear life onto the remains of the rope bridge. Misty clung around one of his legs. Pikachu clinging onto Ash. Ash is eventually able to pull them all up, and they make their way to the other side of the bridge, pulling themselves up through the remains of this rickety old wooden rope bridge. And this is where they think to themselves, uh-oh, the gang's not all here. We've lost Brock. Brock has fallen in the river, so we better go looking for him. They never have much luck with rope bridges, does Ash or the gang when they're on their adventure. I was surprised and impressed, actually, by Ash's very incredible upper body strength. Not only was he able to hold onto the bridge when it had snapped, but he had Misty holding onto his lower legs, and he had Pikachu on his back, and he was able to pull them all up to safety. So I was surprised at that. I mean, Ash and Misty aren't really getting along at this point. They still haven't really meshed as friends. So, Ash could have just shook his leg and be like, oh, sorry, Misty, you've slipped. And Misty could have fallen in the river too. But anyway, Ash is a good guy, pulled them all up. So they set off to look for Brock. But straight away, Misty falls into a pit trap. What I like to call the Phil Margera trap. If you know, on a Jackass movie where Bam Margera, he put a load of branches and leaves and stuff in the garden, and then his dad was riding in a ride-on lawnmower and then went over the hole and fell in the hole. That's what a pit trap is. Misty falls into a pit trap. Pretty similar to the ones that we see Team Rocket building quite often, but this one wasn't built by Team Rocket. We'd find out who it was built by very soon in the episode. Ash, again, to the rescue, is able to reach down and pull Misty out of the trap. So, again, essentially like a huge hole in the ground. Misty not having a good day, is she? And they continue on to search for Brock, but they wouldn't get very far because Misty would catch her foot in like a booby trap, like a hoop of rope. She'd catch her foot in that, and that would spring them all up into the air, captured inside of like a huge net hanging from a tree. Reminds me of the net from Return of the Jedi, where Chewbacca goes through the Endor forest, and then he sees some animal carcass. He's like, I'm going to eat that. Goes to eat it, and then Han and Luke and 3PO, R2, Chewie they all end up in this big net that had been placed there as a booby trap by the Ewoks. So very similar sort of setup. I'm not sure if it was the Ewoks, though, that captured Misty and Ash, but either way, Misty tripped on the booby trap, which sprung them in the air into a giant net. While they're in the net, Ash speculates that Brock has probably been washed away and shanghaied by pirates. Quite the imagination on Ash. I mean, if I saw my friend fall from a bridge into a river, I too think I'd probably come to the conclusion that the next logical step would be that they've been, shanghaied by pirates. So, understandable. But Brock would then appear at the bottom of the tree. He's like, hey guys, what's up? They're up in the tree. And Brock comes to the rescue, cuts the rope, which lowers the net and frees Ash, Misty, and Pikachu. Brock, for some reason, just has like a giant hunting knife. I've never seen him use the knife in any other episode of Pokemon before this or after, but I guess it was needed for this particular scene. So he comes along and he's like, oh, don't worry, I'll cut you down. And then he just cuts them down with this huge hunting knife. It's quite strange to see a knife in Pokemon, but at least the gang are free. Brock says that he wasn't taken by pirates. In fact, he washed down the river, but was rescued by a girl. Lucky Brock, because Brock does like the ladies. So Brock goes on to tell Ash and Misty that he was rescued from the rapids by a girl named Melanie. We'd soon meet Melanie, as Brock would take Ash and Misty into the nearby village. On the way, we kind of see a lot of grass-type Pokemon around, a few different Pokemon cropping up here and there. We see an Oddish, and we see Parasect, and we see a little Bulbasaur there. So a little bit of a clue as to what's going on. Brock explains that it's a hidden village, especially for abandoned or injured Pokemon, where they can come and rest and relax. And Melanie actually volunteers to take care of these Pokemon until they're well enough to leave. So it's quite sad if you think about the fact that some of the Pokemon there have been abandoned by their trainers. They've just given up on them because they either didn't train them well enough or they just didn't win enough battles for them. So these Pokemon have been kicked out in the wild. So this is kind of like a Pokemon health spa. A Pokemon health spa where these Pokemon can retreat. Melanie will take care of them until they are well enough to leave again. Now, Melanie just does this out of the goodness of her heart. She's not a Pokemon doctor. She's not a Nurse Joy, obviously, because she's called Melanie. And she says that she volunteers to look after these Pokemon, and she uses plants from around the forest to make medicine, but she's not actually qualified to be a Pokemon doctor. So, is she a Pokemon witch doctor? I don't know. But either way, Melanie seems like a good person. I like you, Melanie. You're good with me. Brock already starting to fall in love with Melanie, like he does with all of the female characters. Misty gives him a little bit of teasing here. Brock goes bright red and holds his hand over her mouth in case she hears. I mean, it's probably already obvious to her by now, Brock. I don't think you're very good at keeping it subtle when it comes to liking the female characters. And we'd actually find out that it was Melanie who set the booby traps. So it wasn't Team Rocket, it was Melanie. She'd sabotaged the bridge. She'd set the pitfall that Misty fell into. She'd set the huge Return of the Jedi Ewok net that sprung them in the air. I mean, cutting the ropes on the bridge, maybe that was a little bit too far, Melanie, because that could have ended in disaster. But either way, she said that she did that because she wanted to protect the Pokemon that are in the village from any trainers who might be traveling through and any Pokemon trainers who might try to capture the Pokemon. And I suppose she's not wrong, because that's exactly what Misty and Ash tried to do as soon as they saw the Pokemon. They saw an Oddish, just having a little sippity sip, and Misty tried to catch it straight away. Bulbasaur came to the rescue. Ash just tried to catch it straight away. They didn't even know that these were injured Pokemon that lived in this nearby, Pokemon health spa. So maybe Melanie's justified in setting these booby traps. I think cutting a rope bridge is maybe a little bit extreme. But at least we know how we ended up here. So you're keeping up? We've got to the Hidden Village. Ash, Misty, and Brock, they're all safe, and they've met a character called Melanie. Melanie's explained that she runs like a retreat here in the middle of the forest, which looks after injured and abandoned Pokemon. Ash, though, isn't sure if the traps will be enough, saying that only idiots would get caught in them, which is, I think a bit of a dig at Misty. Take that, Misty, because Misty got caught in all the traps, and maybe she's an idiot. And at this exact moment, we cut to our favourite set of idiots, Team Rocket. Jesse James and Meowth, who have just fallen into their third pit trap. So they'd got out of one, fell straight into another. Got out of that, fallen straight into another. And this scene made me laugh because as they're all kind of piled up at the bottom of the hole, we see Meowth. And in the actual animation, for some reason, Meowth has like a plaster on his butt. Like one of those plasters. It's like an X, and it's just on his butt. So I don't know, maybe he'd fallen on a twig in a very precarious position. That made me laugh anyway, Meowth with a plaster on his butt. And they finally managed to get out of the third hole, only to get caught in the Return of the Jedi net. Hooked up in the air, in the same net where we saw Ash and Misty not too long ago. Team Rocket are hot on the trail of Ash, but seem to be getting caught in all of Melanie's traps. Brock and Ash are tending to Staryu, who was quickly defeated by Bulbasaur, while Misty apologises to Oddish, now that she's got a clearer picture of the situation. And Oddish is quite sweet here. He uses his little Oddish leaf, and he wipes Misty's tears away. Ash would come in, start having an argument with Misty. These two just can't get along, can they? At this stage, they're always just bickering. And because they're arguing, Bulbasaur, he doesn't like it. He comes in, he tackles Misty, because I guess he thinks that she's going to try and capture Oddish again. And Oddish is, he's pretty weak, so it's nice to see that Bulbasaur's sticking up for him, but Bulbasaur is almost attacking Misty here. So Ash would turn around and challenge Bulbasaur to a battle. He's had enough of Bulbasaur's bolshiness, and he challenges him to a Pokemon battle. Melanie would come in and explain that the reason that Bulbasaur is so protective is because he's actually the protector of the whole village. He protects all the Pokemon. And Bulbasaur here he's had enough. He's had enough of Ash, and he's trying to push him off screen. He's like nudging at his leg, and he's just like, I don't trust you. You're a Pokemon trainer. Get out of town. But at this point, Team Rocket would crash the party, as suddenly we see Team Rocket appearing from the distance behind a cloud. They are standing on it's like an entire baseball stadium that is suspended but from the air by balloons. And yeah, that is exactly what it is. I didn't get that wrong. It's like an entire baseball stadium, which is one of the most elaborate Team Rocket flying contraptions, like an entire baseball stadium. I don't know how many balloons it took to lift that. Probably 5 or 6, but yeah, for some reason they're on a baseball stadium and they're flying in, or they're coming in and they're on a baseball stadium. Team Rocket come in, sing their Team Rocket motto, and they land just outside of this hidden Pokemon retreat with their plan to collect all of the injured Pokemon with a huge vacuum. If there's one thing that Team Rocket like, it's a huge vacuum cleaner. So Brock cuts in, says, come on everyone, quick, get in this nearby log cabin. They're all trying to run to safety, but Team Rocket switch the power on their huge vacuum and start to suck Oddish into their trap. Luckily, Bulbasaur's able to save him with his Vine Whips, and Ash then comes in to save Bulbasaur because he needs an extra hand to resist the strength of the vacuum cleaner. So Ash kind of pushes Bulbasaur along, gets him to safety, and I guess this is where then Bulbasaur lets his guard down a little bit more, sees that Ash is a good guy, and maybe starts to bond with him a little bit more. And Bulbasaur would use his Vine Whips to kind of batter the vacuum cleaner nozzle around. It was like a Pokemon battle between Bulbasaur and the vacuum cleaner. There probably is a vacuum cleaner Pokemon now. I mean, there's so many Pokemon now. There probably is one based on a vacuum cleaner. But this wouldn't take long for the vacuum cleaner to, spin out of control, and Team Rocket's plan would soon backfire. What I liked here, though, we actually seen Team Rocket doing like a little baseball chant There are a few baseball references in the early Pokemon anime series. I'm not sure if maybe baseball is particularly popular in Japan, but we see an episode later on in the series that's very baseball themed as well. But we see Team Rocket here, they got their own little flags, quite proud of themselves. They're chanting along, they're saying, "Let's go team, distill them is our dream. Let's go Rocket, put Pokemon in our pocket." I had to remember what that was to recite it, so I'm pretty proud of myself. That could have been their motto. That could have been an alternate motto. But don't show yourselves on, Team Rocket, because things are about to go awry. Ash sends out Pidgeotto to use Gust, and this causes a huge tornado that wraps up the entire baseball stadium that Team Rocket are standing on and sends them flying into the distance. Impressive. I've got to hand it to Pidgeotto. Pidgeotto's Gust attack is strong enough to kind of uplift an entire baseball stadium, and Team Rocket would be sent off into the distance. Melanie would take this as an opportunity to ask Ash if he'd like to keep Bulbasaur. She says that the pair seem to be a good match, and she says that the village is actually too small for Bulbasaur to grow. Bulbasaur needs to go out and explore and be in a wider environment for the bulb on its back to grow in order for it to be able to evolve. So she says, "Would you like to take Bulbasaur with you, Ash? Because from what I can see, I think you'll be a good pair." She then goes on to say that she thinks that a lot of the other injured Pokemon in the village, the only reason that they're staying around is because Bulbasaur protects them so much, they're so safe that they don't want to actually leave. So maybe Bulbasaur needs to leave the village for the greater good so that some of these other Pokemon can, try and get their strength back and get back out there. Bulbasaur agrees. Bulbasaur. That's what he says, and I think that means I agree. He agrees to go with Ash, but first, he wants to battle. Bulbasaur hasn't forgotten about your trash talk, Ash. He says, "Yeah, I'll come with you, but first, let's have a Pokemon battle." It would be Ash and Pikachu versus Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur would use Vine Whip. Pikachu able to dodge and use Tackle Attack against Bulbasaur. But Bulbasaur's able to battle back with his Vine Whips, and he actually uses them to slam Pikachu into the ground. Ash would call for Thunderbolt, and zap! Pikachu uses the Thunderbolt, which travel down Bulbasaur's vines, and they essentially electrocute Bulbasaur into submission. We see Bulbasaur's eyes go squiggly, which is a sign that he's defeated. And so Ash would throw out a Pokeball and capture Bulbasaur. I'm not quite sure why Ash threw a Pokeball out to capture Bulbasaur, because at this stage he'd already agreed to go with him. He was like, "Yeah, I'll come with you, but first let's just have a Pokemon battle." And so he didn't exactly need to throw the Pokeball, but he did anyway. Brock, still infatuated with Melanie, would actually turn around and offer to stay at the Hidden Village and help her with looking after the injured Pokemon. But she's like, "Nah, you're okay. You carry on your adventure." He was willing to trade himself in a Pokemon trade. He's like, "Oh, well, maybe if we have Bulbasaur, you can have me, Brock." But she's like, "Nah, you're all right. I'd rather have nothing." So Bulbasaur joins the gang. Misty, Brock, Ash, and Pikachu wave goodbye, and they continue on their journey to Vermilion City. The episode would wrap up with a quote from our favourite narrator, the Pokemon narrator, who would say, "With Bulbasaur now at his side, it looks like Ash is now building his own dream team. Now it's on to Vermilion City. Let's hope our heroes don't take any more shortcuts, or we may never get there." And that would be the end of Bulbasaur and the Hidden Village. What a jam-packed episode. Fun one to go back and rewatch. In this episode, we saw the debuts of Melanie, the unofficial Pokemon doctor. We saw the Pokemon debuts of an Oddish and Bulbasaur. And I've chosen Bulbasaur to be this week's Pokemon Spotlight. So Bulbasaur, Japanese name, Fishing Dane. God. The Japanese name is Fushiging Dane. I think that's how that's pronounced. And Bulbasaur is a dual-type grass/poison Pokemon introduced in Generation 1. Bulbasaur's Pokédex number is number 1. Yep, that's right. Bulbasaur is number 1. He is actually the first official Pokemon ever in the National Pokédex. And some Bulbasaur trivia for you. In the Japanese Nintendo game Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, Professor Oak classifies Bulbasaur as the plant Pokemon when the player is able to choose it as one of their first starter Pokemon. But in the English version of Fire Red and Leaf Green, he calls it the grass Pokemon. Bulbasaur's evolutionary line is the only first partner Pokemon family to have the poison type, and Bulbasaur's evolutionary line is also the first partner line to have each member appear at least once in the Super Smash Bros. Series. So there you go, Super Smash Bros. Back again with another fact. But we do get to see Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur all make an appearance in the Super Smash Bros. Games. Now, another fact here, there used to be an old Pokemon game called the Poké-ROM, which would include like a quiz as a mini game and all other sorts of facts and trivia about Pokemon. And in that game, it describes Bulbasaur as strong. But Bulbasaur, you are strong. I guess he's strong-willed, strong in sticking up for his friends. I dove into some of the origin of the Bulbasaur character and found out that Bulbasaur is actually based on a frog. It's particularly based on a frog because of its short legs and its like stout-like appearance. And Bulbasaur kind of has like these ear-like protrusions coming from its head, which is based on horned frogs. Specific type of frog. Not horny frogs, horned frogs. Now, according to Ken Sugimori, who was the illustrator of the original Pokemon games, he says that Bulbasaur was actually designed last in its evolutionary line, meaning that Venusaur was designed first, and then Ivysaur, and then Bulbasaur. So, interesting, for some reason, they were designed in reverse order. And Bulbasaur, well known for having the bulb on its back, and also in its name. The bulb on its back is a bulb that resembles a lily or an onion. So, I guess it could have been called Onionosaur. Could have been called that. Maybe that was just second name for him. They were thinking, what should we call him? Onionosaur? Yeah, but anyway, that's some Bulbasaur facts for you. Hope you enjoyed them. Now, I'm going to be back, and I'm going to be looking at some episode trivia. I'm going to be diving into Dragonite's mailbag. We're going to see if there's anything worth reading out on this week's Jokemon. And I've got a new segment for you. But first, we got to take a pause for the cause. Got to keep the lights on in the Pika Pals studio with a quick message from our sponsors. Picture this, a low-energy LED light bulb, so eco-friendly, even a Bulbasaur would be proud. With Bulbasaur's LED light, you can illuminate your space while reducing your energy consumption. It's like having your very own grass-type Pokemon powering your home with its solar beam energy. And for Pika Pals Podcast listeners, we've got an exclusive deal. Use the code POWERPLANT to save 1% on your first purchase. It's time to brighten up your life with a little help from everyone's favourite green companion, Bulbasaur. Remember, with Bulbasaur's LED light, you're not just saving energy, you're also adding a touch of whimsical charm to your space. After all, who wouldn't want a piece of the Pokemon world right in their own home? Bulbasaur's LED lights, the eco-friendly choice for every Pokemon master.
Pika!
Get ready to flex your taste buds with Machop's monthly Pork Chops, the subscription service that'll have you feeling as mighty as a Machop. Each month, our team of culinary experts, led by none other than the four-armed wonder himself, hand select the finest pork chops and deliver them straight to your door. No gym badges required. With Machop's super strength, your juicy pork chops will be karate chopped to perfection before being packaged and delivered. And as a special offer for Pika Pals Podcast listeners, you could use the promo code CHOPCHOPCHOP to receive a bonus pack of Machop's secret seasoning blend, guaranteed to pack a flavorful punch. So never settle for bland meals again with Machop's monthly pork chops. Subscribe today and power up your dinner game. Remember, Machop doesn't just use his strength in battle, he uses it for pork chops too. Okay, we're back. You're listening to the Pika Pals Podcast. At least, hopefully, you still are. Might be given up by now. If you're still listening, thanks. We're going to look at some episode trivia from episode 10, Bulbasaur and the Hidden Village. This is the first episode of a 3-episode arc where Ash would actually encounter each of Kanto's first starter Pokemon. So, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. Over the next few episodes, we will be meeting all of them. Now, as I alluded to earlier, this is actually one of the few times that we see a knife in the Pokemon show. A huge hunting knife that Brock had for some reason. We don't tend to see knives or guns or anything like that in Pokemon very often, but we would see a knife in this episode. I found this interesting, that in the Japanese version, when Pidgeotto blows the stadium away, James makes a reference to a Japanese baseball player, Hideo Nomo, and that player was actually playing for the Major League Baseball's Los Angeles Dodgers at the time of this airing. So, I said earlier, Pokemon does tend to have a few baseball references in it, and I think baseball must be particularly popular in Japan. But in the original Japanese version, James references a player who was playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers. There you go. There's a fact. If someone ever asks you to make a connection between the Los Angeles Dodgers and James from Team Rocket, there you go, that is the fact. Now this is the first of only 2 times in which Misty would attempt to catch a non-water type Pokemon. We saw her try to catch an Oddish, and in an episode later in the series, we see her try to catch a Jigglypuff. The plot for this episode is actually later reused in another episode called Getting Twiggy With It, where a grass-type starter Pokemon protects a village full of injured Pokemon and is aided by a female character. We actually kind of see a repeat of this episode much later on in the series with some different characters. For some reason, and I couldn't really figure out why, but then as I watched it back, I did notice this. In the Netflix version of this episode, and the version that's on the Pokemon YouTube channel, when Pidgeotto is using its Gust attack on Team Rocket, the animation has been slightly slowed down, and you can kind of notice it once you watch it, but I'm not quite sure why, but for some reason Netflix were like, whoa, hold on a minute, Pidgeotto, we can't be dealing with Gust attacks that fast, so we're going to have to slow things down just a bit. Netflix. They do not want fast Gust attacks. I like to look into some of the dub edits in these Pokemon episodes, see what had been changed from the original Japanese airing to the English dub, and I found out with this episode that the exchange between Ash and Misty at the bridge is altered. In the English version, Ash is kind of losing confidence in himself, that he's not going to be able to pull them up off the bridge, and Misty encourages him. Whereas in the Japanese version, Ash says that Misty is far too heavy for her, and Misty berates Ash for even implying that she's fat. So in the Japanese one, Ash is like, I can't pull you up, you're too fat. But they toned that down for the English release. Another different exchange is when they're actually caught in the net, when they're captured in that booby trap net. In the English dub, Ash attempts to break out of the net and Misty tells him that the plan isn't working. But in the Japanese version, when Ash attempts to break free from the net and starts, shaking and wriggling around, Misty tells Ash to stop doing that because all his wriggling around is making him touch her in inappropriate places. That's the Japanese version for you. Another difference is what happened to Brock. We saw him fall into the river, and Ash would think he was captured by pirates. But in the Japanese version, Ash actually says Brock's probably being captured by an ugly old hag washing clothes in the river. Savage. Now, as I've been rewatching some of these Pokemon episodes, I wanted to dive into some online reviews, see what people are saying about these Pokemon episodes and the original Pokemon series. So I went on to IMDb and I found some reviews, and I'm going to share some of them with you in a new segment that I'm going to call IMDb the very best, like no one ever was. This particular review rates Pokemon the original series 7 out of 10, and it says, "This series is worth watching in its early years. It was very clever and had different plots. The show is better than most people give it credit for. I recently watched some of the old episodes that I hadn't seen since I was around the age of 10, and I noticed the adult humour that I never recognised when I was young. I think it has the potential to beat some of the heavily favoured sitcoms these days. No lying. I followed the show first for the Pokemon. I then became interested in the humour, and I think it ranks as one of the top 5 humour pleasures I can enjoy. Though they should cancel the show now, as it's lost its greatness. Just maybe there's hope for the future for it to keep going." That review came in from a user on IMDb called Aaron Evil. So he was kind of giving it some praise there, and then right at the end he trashed it. 7 out of 10, that was this week's review on IMDb, the very best, like no one ever was. Now, another thing that I like to do is look at some life lessons, some Pokemon philosophy, and in rewatching these episodes, see if there's something that we can learn from Pokemon. And in rewatching this episode, a real life lesson that can be learned is the importance of recognizing when it's time to move on and embrace new challenges for personal growth. In this episode, Bulbasaur's done an excellent job protecting the village and looking after the injured Pokemon, but the bulb on its back can't grow in such a small environment. Melanie is big enough to recognize this and let Bulbasaur go. She realizes that for the greater good, for both Bulbasaur and for the other Pokemon in the village, it's essential for Bulbasaur to leave and experience new horizons. So if we think about this and mirror it to real life scenarios, maybe this could teach us that personal growth often requires stepping outside of our comfort zone. I've had to step outside of my comfort zone in making this Pika Pals podcast, but I'm glad that I have. I think that it's allowed me to grow as a person. The bulb on my back has grown. So exploring new opportunities and facing new challenges head on can be something that is good for us, even when it seems like maybe a scary step to take. So we should recognize when it's time to make a change and have the courage to pursue new paths, as these could lead to personal development and greater fulfillment in life, just like Bulbasaur going off on his adventures with Ash. So there's a Pokemon lesson for you taken from this week's episode, reminding us that the world of Pokemon can provide valuable insights that we can all apply to our everyday lives. And here's something that none of us should apply to our everyday lives. It's Pokemon jokes. Time for some jokes. This is the part of the show where we tell jokes. Everyone's favourite segment. It's time for Jokemon. Okay, let's see what we've got. Jokemon. Why did James go broke? He kept investing in Magikarp stocks. Why was Arcanine disqualified at Crufts? He kept running into things and setting them on fire. Yeah, well, I guess that would be a disqualification. I finally caught a Ditto. Or did it catch me? Either way, I'm not sure which one of us is the real trainer anymore. So stupid. So stupid. What did the Wartortle say to the Squirtle? You're really coming out of your shell. Why did the trainer quit using magma? He was tired of getting fired. Okay, here's the last one. My therapist told me to try exposure therapy to get over my fear of ghosts. So I went to the Lavender Town Pokemon Tower. But now I'm afraid of therapists. Alrighty everyone, that was this week's Pokemon jokes. That was Jokemon. Yeah. Well, anyway, that was Jokemon. I'm going to collect all these jokes. I think I might release a joke book. Probably no one would ever buy that, but hey, you know, stranger things have happened. Let's see what you guys have to say. Any questions or comments about Pokemon? It's time for Ring Ring Ring. Phone call. Phone call.
Hello, this is the Ketchum residence.
Hello, Pika Pals Podcast. Thank you for answering my question. I really enjoy the show. I would like to know if you could travel anywhere in the Pokemon world, where would you go? Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you for leaving that question on the Pokemon answering machine. Where would I like to go in the Pokemon world? I think I'd probably go to Pallet Town, just because that's where it all began. It's Ash's hometown. I'd get to go and meet Ash's mum. Maybe I could meet Ash if he was around. I could go and see Professor Oak, and I just think it would be really cool to go to the actual Pallet Town. So if I could choose anywhere to travel in the Pokemon world, I would go to Pallet Town. But thank you very much for your question. Now I've got some questions that have been sent in via email, social media, the comment section, and they are in Dragonite's mailbag. The first one says, Hey Jed, I've been wondering, if you were a Pokemon gym leader, what type of Pokemon would you specialize in, and why? If I was a Pokemon gym leader, what type of Pokemon would I specialize in? A Pokemon gym. So Brox runs a rock-type gym, and Misty and her sisters had the water gym. We would, in the series, go on to see many other types of gyms. So what about me? I think maybe a bug-type gym. I was always a fan of Caterpie, Metapod, and Butterfree when I was younger, and I think there's quite a few types of bug Pokemon that are pretty cool. So maybe a bug-type gym in the middle of the forest, where you only one rule. You have to wear shorts. Yeah, I think I'd run a bug type gym. So thank you for that question. And another question in Dragonite's mailbag. And this one says, Hello Jed. Who do you think is the most underrated Pokemon in the series? Do you think it deserves more recognition, and why? Who's the most underrated Pokemon? I do think that maybe Meowth is underrated. Meowth's my favourite Pokemon, and I think he might be underrated as a Pokemon because people dismiss him as an actual Pokemon. he's such a strong character in the show, and because he can talk human language, that you kind of forget that Meowth is a Pokemon. So maybe Meowth is the most underrated, or possibly Porygon, and that it would be because what would happen in the Porygon episode, and the fact that then Porygon was kind of retired as a Pokemon from that point forward. So maybe Porygon would take the title for the most underrated, and I do think that maybe Porygon deserves a bit more recognition and love. That was all the questions that I've got this week in Dragonite's mailbag. If you would like to send me a question, please do. You can leave a comment in the comments section, or you can find me on the social medias, or you can send me an email at yeetamania@gmail.com. Now, before we go, let's look at what we learned on the show tonight.
What did we learn on the show tonight, Jen?
Pika Pika!
Well, Ash and Misty, bickering as usual, stumbled upon an oddish. Proof that sometimes good things come from disagreements. Who needs harmony when you've got accidental Pokemon encounters? Not all heroes wear capes. Some have bulbs on their back. Just when you think a battle's in the bag, a wild Bulbasaur appears. Clearly, this little fellow has been watching too many action movies, jumping in to save the day like a plant-based Rambo. And bridge safety protocols definitely need reviewing in the Pokemon world. A rope bridge snaps, sending our beloved Brock plummeting into the river. If nothing else, this teaches us to check the structural integrity of every rope bridge before crossing. Or better yet, invest in a flying Pokemon. So there you go, folks. That does it for today's episode. Be sure to tune in again next week when we will be on to episode 11 of the original Pokemon anime series, and we get to meet Charmander for the first time. But that does it for this week. It's the end of the show, and you know what that means.
The time has come. It's for the best, I know it. Who could have guessed that you and I, somehow, someway, we'd have to say goodbye.
Somehow today we'd have to say goodbye. Do 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 do. Somehow, some way we have to say goodbye. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget to leave a review and a rating on your chosen podcast platform. That will help others to discover the Pika Pals Podcast. And if you think anyone else might enjoy the show, friend or family member, send it to them too. That would be really cool. You can find me on social media at yeetamania for exclusive content and all things Pokemon. Feel free to share your love, send questions, suggestions, comments, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, just let me know. I'd love to have you on and chat about Pokemon. You can also reach me via email at yeetamania@gmail.com. Details about my Pika Pals Unite fundraiser are in the episode description, where I am raising £151, the same number of original Pokemon, to support my local mental health charity, Mind. Thank you to everyone who's donated so far, and any donation of any size really will make a difference. So thank you very much. Stay tuned this week to my social media channels, as I have another special guest episode coming out later in the week where I will be talking to a good friend of mine, Mark, and we're chatting about all things Pokemon. So keep an eye out for that episode. But that does it for today, folks. I've been Jed. This has been the Pika Pals Podcast. And you've been a real Pika Pal.